Chapter 1. James Mitchell arrived at Sharp Innovations at precisely 6:45 a.m., as he did every Monday. The security guard nodded at him with a mixture of respect and pity as he swiped his badge. "Early as always, Mr. Mitchell," the guard said. "Morning, Frank, and it's still just James." He offered a tight smile. "Is anyone else in yet?" "Just you and the cleaning crew, though Ms. Sharp's light was on when I came in at 6. James felt his stomach tighten. "She stayed all night?" Frank shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time. Though I gotta say, she looked fresh as a daisy when she came down for her morning run. Don't know how she does it." "Good genes and better cosmetics," James muttered under his breath. The elevator ride to the executive floor gave James exactly 47 seconds to mentally prepare himself. Victoria Sharp, CEO of Sharp Innovations, brilliant marketing strategist, and the most infuriating woman he'd ever met, required nothing less than perfection. And on Mondays, she required caffeinated perfection. The office was quiet as he made his way to his desk, situated in the antechamber outside Victoria's office. Her door was closed, but light spilled from underneath it. James placed his bag down and immediately went to the executive kitchen to prepare her coffee. Black, with exactly half a teaspoon of raw sugar, heated to precisely 165 degrees. Not 160, not 170. He'd learned that lesson the hard way 3 months into the job when she'd taken a sip, frowned, and poured it into his potted plant while maintaining eye contact. As the coffee brewed, he pulled out his phone and reviewed her schedule for the day. Board meeting at 9, strategy session at 11, lunch with the Nakamura team at 1, followed by back-to-back meetings until 6 p.m. He'd need to find 15 minutes somewhere for her to review the Henderson proposal before tomorrow morning. "You're here early." James nearly dropped the mug. Victoria stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Despite clearly having spent the night at the office, she looked immaculate in a charcoal pencil skirt and white silk blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. Only the faintest shadows under her eyes hinted at her all-nighter. "Good morning, Miss Sharp," he replied, steadying his voice. "I saw the quarterly report needed some adjustments." "Did I ask for adjustments?" She raised an eyebrow, taking the coffee from him without acknowledgement. She leaned against the counter, somehow making the simple kitchen look like a backdrop for a fashion shoot. Even after an all-nighter, Victoria managed to look like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. "No, but the Henderson numbers were off by 0.3%. 0.4, actually. I corrected them at 3 this morning." Of course she had. James felt a familiar mixture of irritation and admiration. "I also prepared briefing notes for your board meeting. They're on your desk, along with the revised marketing plan." She took another sip of the coffee, then nodded almost imperceptibly. In Victoria's speak, this was effusive praise. The Nakamura team confirmed lunch, but Mr. Nakamura mentioned bringing his nephew who's studying marketing at Columbia. Victoria's expression darkened. "Cancel it. Reschedule for Thursday." "They're flying back to Tokyo Wednesday night." "Then they can eat alone, and not turning a client meeting into a college mentorship opportunity." James hesitated. The nephew is apparently being groomed to take over their North American operations. Victoria let out an exasperated sigh. "Fine, but you're coming too. Order the omakase at Mitsuharu. Make sure they have a private room." She turned to leave, then paused, giving him a quick once-over with a slightly curled lip. "And James, wear the navy Armani. The Nakamuras appreciate proper presentation. And those shoes with the slight lift. You looked almost presentable at the Goldstein meeting." With that casual height jab delivered, she disappeared down the hallway, leaving James caught between annoyance at being treated like a mannequin and a treacherous flicker of pleasure that she'd noticed what he wore. He glanced down at his perfectly polished Oxfords, the ones without any lift whatsoever, and felt the familiar sting of her casual cruelty. The next 2 hours passed in a flurry of activity. James finalized the board presentations, rescheduled 3 calls to accommodate the Nakamura lunch, and fielded increasingly panicked messages from the creative team whose presentation was scheduled for 11 a.m. At 8:50, Victoria emerged from her office. "The board deck is insufficient," she announced without preamble. "The competitive analysis lacks depth." James looked up, keeping his expression neutral despite the fact that he'd created the competitive analysis exactly as she had specified. "I followed the template from the last meeting. The template is outdated. We need a slide breaking down Meyer Communications' new pricing strategy and how it affects our positioning." "Meyer hasn't announced their new pricing yet." "They announced it 20 minutes ago. It's on their website." "I'll add it right away. Do you want me to delay the board members?" "Absolutely not. Just have it ready before I get to that section." She checked her watch. "The Braxton report?" "On your tablet under recent files. I highlighted the relevant passages." She gave another almost imperceptible nod. "After the board meeting, I need you to call Robert Chen. Tell him I'm reconsidering his proposal, but need a 15% reduction." He explicitly said the price was firm. The corner of Victoria's mouth quirked up in what, on anyone else, might have been a smile. "Then you'll need to be persuasive, won't you?" James watched her walk toward the boardroom, her posture perfect, her stride confident. Several employees scrambled out of her path like startled birds. A few male executives turned to stare as she passed, which Victoria pretended not to notice while clearly basking in the attention. He allowed himself exactly 3 seconds to acknowledge the absurdity of his situation. He was an excellent executive assistant with an MBA from Cornell who could have worked anywhere, yet here he was enabling the maddening behavior of a woman who treated Machiavelli's The Prince as a self-improvement guide. A woman he couldn't stop thinking about, despite his better judgment. The realization made him scowl as he began working on the new slide. He had exactly 7 minutes to create something that wouldn't earn him another condescending look from Victoria Sharp. He knew exactly what she wanted, had studied her preferences like a doctoral thesis, yet still fell short, especially in the one area he could never change. 6-foot-something with a defined jawline and lean athletic build, that was Victoria's type, as evidenced by her string of model-esque boyfriends who inevitably bored her within weeks. James has an athletic build. He wasn't exactly lean, but had others she claimed to want: intelligence, ambition, efficiency, impeccable taste. But at 5'9", he would always be looking up at her in those damned heels she insisted on wearing. His phone buzzed with a text from Alina in marketing. "How bad is her mood today? Scale of 1 to 10. James considered. Victoria was demanding and exacting as always, but she hadn't actually thrown anything or made anyone cry yet. "Solid 6, he texted back. "Approach with caution and data." He finished the slide with 2 minutes to spare and sent it to Victoria's tablet. Seconds later, his phone pinged. "Font is inconsistent with slide 17. Fix immediately." James stifled a groan and made the correction. No thank you, no acknowledgement of the near impossible task she had set, just another demand. When the board meeting finally ended, at 11:45, the members filed out with their usual mixture of awe and shell-shock. Victoria had that effect on people. James was waiting with a fresh coffee and the creative team's latest mock-ups. "How'd it go?" he asked, though he knew better than to expect an actual answer. Predictably, she took the coffee. "Jenkins still doesn't understand basic market economics, and Latimer keeps pushing his nephew's startup as a potential acquisition." "The AR company?" "VR," she corrected sharply, "and it's garbage. Schedule a call with Latimer tomorrow. I need to shut this down before he wastes more of my time." already on your calendar for 3 p.m. For a brief moment, something that might have been approval flickered across Victoria's face. The creative team. Waiting in the conference room, they've revised the Whitman campaign. It better be an improvement over the disaster they showed me last week. She started walking, then turned back. The mayor slide was adequate. Next time, use a different visualization for the pricing tiers. From Victoria, adequate was practically a standing ovation. I'll remember that, James said, following her to the conference room where the creative team waited like lambs for slaughter. Marcus was the creative director, was mid-sentence with his team when Victoria entered. The room went silent immediately. "Well," Victoria said, settling into her chair at the head of the table, "impress me."
Marcus glanced nervously at James, who gave him an encouraging nod. It was going to be a long day. 4 hours later, James sat across from Victoria and the Nakamura team at Mitsuharu, silently translating Victoria's blunt statements into diplomatic language while making sure the young nephew felt included. Victoria was being her usual self, brilliant, incisive, and completely unconcerned with social niceties. But the Nakamuras seemed impressed rather than offended. Mr. Nakamura's associate, a tall, conventionally handsome man named Tanaka, was paying particular attention to Victoria, who was subtly preening under his gaze. James noted the way she kept tucking her hair behind her ear and leaning slightly forward when Tanaka spoke. "Miss Sharp, your approach to market segmentation is most innovative," Mr. Nakamura said as the sashimi course arrived. Victoria nodded. "It's basic pattern recognition. Your current strategy ignores the urban millennial demographic entirely." James jumped in. "What Miss Sharp means is that we've identified an exciting opportunity to expand your market share." Victoria shot him a look. "That's exactly what I said." The nephew, Kenji, leaned forward eagerly. "My thesis research supports Miss Sharp's assessment. The demographic data shows—" "Data without insight is just numbers. What's your proposed strategy?" For the next 20 minutes, James watched as Victoria systematically dismantled and then rebuilt the young man's marketing concepts, oscillating between brutally critical and surprisingly instructive. By the end, Kenji looked both shell-shocked and enlightened. "Thank you for your guidance, Miss Sharp," Kenji said with a deep bow as they prepared to leave. Victoria handed him her business card. "Email James your thesis. I'll review it." James managed to keep his expression neutral, though this was the first he'd heard of this assignment. Mr. Nakamura looked positively delighted. "Perhaps when we return next month, we could continue this discussion over dinner," Tanaka suggested, his eyes fixed on Victoria. At 6'2", he towered over both James and the Nakamuras. Victoria's smile transformed her face, softening the sharp edges. "I'd be delighted. James can coordinate the details." James felt a sharp pang in his chest, but kept his professional smile firmly in place as he nodded. "Of course." Once the Nakamuras had left, Victoria checked her watch. "We're running late. Cancel my 3 p.m. with accounting." "Roger needs to review the quarterly." "Roger can wait. The Whitman campaign is more important." She stood, straightening her skirt. "You handled the nephew well." The unexpected compliment caught James off guard. "Thank you." "Don't let it go to your head. Your tie is crooked." She reached out and adjusted it herself, standing close enough that James could smell her signature perfume. "And call Tanaka's office tomorrow. Set up that dinner for the first Friday after they return." James nodded, trying not to show how much her casual proximity affected him. Of course, another business dinner. Victoria's lips curled into a satisfied smile as she examined her reflection in a nearby window, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Did you see his watch? Patek Philippe. And he must be, what, 6'2", 6'3"? She turned back to James. "It's refreshing to meet a man who doesn't need to crane his neck to make eye contact with me in heels." The barb landed precisely as intended. At 5'9", James was exactly 2 inches taller than Victoria, which meant that in her typical 3-inch heels, he was indeed looking slightly upward to meet her eyes. "I'll be sure to include that in his contact details," James replied dryly. "Height, approximately 6'2". Should I also note his shoe size? Victoria shot him a look that could have frozen lava. "Just make the reservation, James." And just like that, balance was restored to the universe. James adjusted his tie again and followed her out, hating himself a little for the warmth that had spread through his chest at her backhanded compliment, and hating himself even more for the jealousy that gnawed at him now. It was going to be a very long week.
Chapter 2. James's Tuesday began just like his Monday, except today, Victoria's coffee required a precise quarter teaspoon of cinnamon. The seemingly arbitrary change wasn't announced. He'd simply learned to check his email at 5:30 a.m. for her overnight optimizations. "James!" Victoria's voice sliced through the morning quiet. He grabbed his tablet and hurried into her office, where she sat framed perfectly by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The morning light caught her cheekbones in a way that almost seemed deliberate, as if she'd positioned herself specifically for the effect. "Yes, Miss Sharp?" "The quarterly review presentation for this afternoon. Where is it?" James frowned slightly. "I sent it to you last night at 8:15 a.m. Victoria flicked her wrist dismissively, her slim gold watch catching the light. "That was the preliminary version. I need the final." "You didn't request any changes." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "I shouldn't have to spell out every little thing, James. I expect you to anticipate my needs." "I'm not a mind reader," he said, then immediately regretted it. Victoria leaned back in her chair, a predatory smile playing on her lips. "No, and here I thought that was your one marketable skill. God knows it isn't your stature." The casual cruelty of the comment stung, but James kept his expression neutral. "What specific changes would you like me to make to the presentation?" She sighed dramatically, as if his incompetence was physically painful for her to witness. "The slides need to be reorganized. Start with market positioning, then financials. And the color scheme is all wrong. It should complement the physical reports." She gestured to a stack of folders on her desk, bound in navy blue with silver embossing. "I used our standard template. And now I am telling you to deviate from it. Is that going to be a problem?" James took a deep breath. "Not at all. I'll have it revised within the hour. Make it 30 minutes. The board moved up the meeting." What? When?" She was already looking at her computer screen, effectively dismissing him. "Apparently, while you were sleeping, some of us were working. 30 minutes, James." James returned to his desk, muttering curses under his breath. The revision would normally take at least 2 hours. He'd have to cut corners, which Victoria would inevitably notice and criticize. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus in Creative. "Meeting still on at 10? She who must not be named looks extra murdery today." James typed back, "Yes, and bring sacrificial offerings. She's at in 8. 30 grueling minutes later, James returned to Victoria's office with the revised presentation. She was on the phone, her back to the door as she gazed out at the city. From his position, he could see her reflection in the window. She was examining her own face as she spoke, adjusting a strand of hair, tilting her chin to catch the light. "I don't care what your engineers say, David. If you can't meet our specifications, we'll find someone who can." She turned, noticing James. "I need to go. Fix it by Friday." She ended the call without waiting for a response. "The presentation," James said, placing his tablet on her desk. Victoria picked it up, scrolling through the slides with irritating slowness. "You used Palatino font. I prefer it for financial data." "Not when it's paired with these graphics." She handed the tablet back to him. "Change it to Baskerville, and the third slide is unnecessary." "The third slide contains the profit margin analysis you specifically requested last week." Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched. And now I'm specifically requesting its removal. The information is redundant. James bit the inside of his cheek. Anything else? Yes. The Henderson deal is closing today. I need you to draft the announcement. I already did. It's in your email, sent at 6:30 this morning. For a fraction of a second, Victoria looked surprised, but she quickly recovered. It needs revisions. The tone is too casual. She stood, smoothing her charcoal pencil skirt, and I need my blue Louboutins for the board meeting, the ones with the 4-inch heels. James knew exactly which shoes she meant, the ones that made her tower over him by a good 2 inches. They're in your private closet, second shelf, left side. Wrong. I moved them yesterday. To where? If I have to tell you, what's the point of having an assistant? She called out as she disappeared into the closet. James pinched the bridge of his nose, counting slowly backwards from 10. When Victoria emerged, she'd refreshed her lipstick to a deeper red and was carrying the blue heels in question, from exactly where he'd said they were. I'll make those changes to the presentation right away, he said, refusing to comment on the shoes. Good. And James, after the board meeting, I need you to escort Richard Evans around the office. He's considering investing. Richard Evans was the 6'4" former college basketball player turned venture capitalist who'd been trying to schedule a meeting with Victoria for months. I thought you said he was, and I quote, an overgrown frat boy with more money than sense. Victoria's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. His money spends just as well as anyone else's, and he's been quite persistent. She slipped on the blue shoes, instantly gaining her advantage's height. Make sure he sees the new design space. He has a weakness for creative women. Shall I line them up for his inspection? James asked dryly. Victoria shot him a look. Don't be crude, James. It doesn't suit you. She gathered her materials for the board meeting, and James, wear something that doesn't make you look like you're going to a funeral. This is a tech company, not a bank. James glanced down at his impeccably tailored charcoal suit. This is Tom Ford. It's depressing. Change your tie at least. With that, she swept out of the office, leaving behind a cloud of her signature perfume and James's simmering frustration. He made the requested changes to the presentation in record time, changed his tie to a deep blue that he knew Victoria would approve of, though he'd never admit how much her approval mattered, and was waiting outside the boardroom when the meeting concluded an hour later. Victoria emerged looking satisfied, which meant the board had bent to her will on whatever matter she'd been pushing. The other board members filed out looking slightly shell-shocked. Evans will be here at 2, she said without preamble. The announcement for the Henderson deal needs to go out before then. Did you fix it? It's in your inbox, awaiting final approval, along with the Nakamura proposal you requested yesterday. I didn't request a Nakamura proposal. James kept his voice level. You said, and I quote, draft something ambitious for Nakamura that will make that tall drink of water want to come back for seconds. A slight flush colored Victoria's cheeks. That was clearly a joke. Was it? Because I have the recording from the dictation app you insist I use? For a brief moment, Victoria looked like she might actually smile. Instead, she checked her reflection in the polished surface of a nearby plaque, adjusting her hair. Well, since you've already done it, I might as well review it. Send it to my phone. I'll look at it during lunch. You don't have lunch scheduled today. I'm having lunch with myself, James. Even I need 20 minutes away from the constant demands of running this company. She started walking toward her office. Hold my calls unless it's Evans or the Henderson people. James followed, making notes on his tablet. The creative team needs your sign-off on the Weber campaign by 3. Tell them it's garbage and they need to start over. You haven't seen it yet. Victoria paused, turning to face him. Do I really need to? Their last 3 concepts have been derivative at best. This one's different. Marcus brought in new talent. She studied him for a moment. Fine. 15 minutes at 3:30, not a second more. She resumed walking. What's my 5 o'clock? dinner with Harrison Wells to discuss the merger possibilities. Victoria stopped so abruptly that James nearly collided with her. Cancel it. He's flying in specifically for this meeting. Then he should have confirmed yesterday when my assistant called his assistant, twice. James could feel a headache forming behind his left eye. He was in the air, his assistant confirmed this morning. That's not good enough, James. My time is valuable. He's offering a 20% premium over market value. Victoria's expression shifted slightly. The prospect of a good deal always captured her attention. Fine, but move it to 7 and change the restaurant to Lucien's. They're fully booked. A smirk played at the corner of her mouth. Not for me, they're not. She continued to her office, then paused in the doorway. Call them now. I want to hear you do it. It was a power play, pure and simple. Victoria knew that James hated making unreasonable demands of service workers, just as she knew that Lucien's would indeed make an exception for her. James made the call, bearing Victoria's scrutinizing gaze as he worked his considerable charm on the maitre d', eventually securing a table for 7 o'clock. Satisfied? He asked after ending the call. Barely adequate, she replied, but there was a gleam of approval in her eyes that made his heart beat a little bit faster, despite himself. Now, about the Evans tour. Make sure to highlight the third quarter projections. He's particularly interested in our expansion plans. I thought this was just a courtesy tour. Victoria sat at her desk, perfectly positioned so the light emphasized her cheekbones. Nothing in business is just anything, James. Evans has connections to 3 potential clients we've been trying to land. Make sure he comes away impressed. I'll get the materials ready. And James? Victoria looked up, her expression unreadable. Try not to be threatened by him. I know how sensitive you can be about certain shortcomings. The deliberate dig made his jaw clench. I'll try to contain my insecurity in the presence of his magnificent height. Victoria's lips quirked. See that you do. She turned her attention to her computer. That will be all. At precisely 2 p.m., Richard Evans strode into the office like he owned the place. All 6'4" of him dressed in casual designer clothes that probably cost more than James's monthly rent. You must be Mitchell, Evans said, extending a hand that he had to reach up to shake. Victoria speaks highly of you. James doubted that very much. Mr. Evans, welcome to Sharp Innovations. Rick, please. So, where's the woman herself? Miss Sharp had an urgent call with the Tokyo office. She sends her regrets and hopes to catch up with you before you leave. The lie came easily. Victoria had made it clear she had no intention of seeing Evans until James had warmed him up. Typical Victoria, Evans said with an indulgent smile that suggested familiarity. Always making you work for her attention. Something in his tone made James bristle. Miss Sharp values efficiency. Now, shall we begin the tour? For the next hour, James guided Evans through the office, highlighting the company's achievements and future plans. Evans nodded and asked appropriate questions, but his eyes kept wandering to the female employees, particularly the taller ones. So, how long have you worked for Victoria? Evans asked as they paused in the design studio. Almost 3 years. Impressive. Most don't last 6 months. What's your secret? James kept his expression professional. I'm good at my job. Evans laughed. Come on, man. Man to man. Victoria is a piece of work. Gorgeous, brilliant, but a complete ballbuster. How do you handle it? I've had CEOs with less ego and more consideration. Miss Sharp has high standards. James replied stiffly. That's corporate speak for she's a nightmare. Look, I get it. Those legs, that face, makes the rest almost worth it. Almost. He clapped him on the shoulder. But you must have the patience of a saint. Or maybe you're just not the type she chews up and spits out. James felt his professional facade slipping. And what type would that be? Evans gestured vaguely at James's entire body. You know, the kind that might be competition. No offense, but you're not exactly her usual. usual physical type. I wasn't aware Miss Sharp had discussed her personal preferences with you, James said coldly. Evans grinned. She hasn't had to. I've met her last 3 boyfriends at industry events. All tall, all conventionally handsome, all thankfully lacking something upstairs, if you know what I mean. Victoria likes her men to be smart, especially in her relationships. He winked, which is why I think I might have a shot. Before James could formulate a response that wouldn't get him fired, his phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Bring him to my office, now. Miss Sharp will see you now, James said, relieved to end this conversation. As they walked to Victoria's office, James felt a knot forming in his stomach. Evan's comments had hit too close to home, confirming everything he already knew about why his feelings for Victoria were both hopeless and irrational.
Victoria was standing when they entered, having clearly taken time to refresh her makeup and change into a form-fitting dress that showcased her figure to perfection. She'd also put the blue Louboutins back on. "Rick," she said warmly, extending her hand, "so sorry to keep you waiting." Evans took her hand, holding it slightly longer than necessary. "Victoria, stunning as always. Your assistant has been taking good care of me." Victoria's eyes flicked briefly to James. "James is invaluable. I'd be lost without him." The compliment, delivered in that honeyed tone she reserved for people she wanted something from, made James want to roll his eyes. Instead, he maintained his professional expression. "Will that be all, Miss Sharp?" Victoria gave him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, could you bring in the projection models for our expansion, the ones on my private server?" It was a dismissal, disguised as a request. James nodded and left, knowing full well that there were no such models on her private server. Victoria just wanted him gone while she worked whatever magic she planned to use on Evans. Back at his desk, James found himself staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. Evans's words echoed in his mind, along with Victoria's countless small cruelties. By any rational measure, he should hate her. She was demanding, narcissistic, and deliberately belittling. Yet, every time she offered the smallest crumb of approval, he found himself pathetically grateful. Every rare, genuine smile sent his heart racing. Even her scent, lingering in the office after she'd left, could distract him for minutes at a time. It was professional Stockholm Syndrome, he told himself. Nothing more. His phone buzzed with another text from Victoria. "Evans is leaving. Schedule a call with him for Friday to discuss terms. And bring me a sparkling water. The Italian one, not that domestic garbage." James grabbed the water from the executive kitchen and headed back to Victoria's office, steeling himself for whatever mind game she was planning next. He found her standing by the window, admiring her reflection again. "Evans gone already?" he asked, placing the water on her desk. Victoria turned, a satisfied smile on her lips. "He's considering a 7-figure investment. Not bad for 30 minutes of my valuable time." "Congratulations. I've scheduled him for Friday at 10 a.m. Make it 11. I have a breakfast meeting." "With whom? There's nothing on your calendar." Victoria took a sip of the sparkling water. "My personal calendar, James. Not everything I do is your business." "Of course. My mistake." He turned to leave. "By the way," Victoria said, causing him to pause at the door, "your revised presentation was acceptable. The board approved all my proposals." Coming from Victoria, it was practically effusive praise. Despite everything, James felt that familiar warmth spreading through his chest. "Thank you. The presentation is in 20 minutes. Make sure Marcus doesn't waste my time with his usual preamble." She returned to her desk, dismissing him without another word. As James left her office, he caught a glimpse of her checking her reflection in her compact mirror, smiling at what she saw. Victoria Sharp was beautiful, brilliant, and utterly self-absorbed, and God help him, he couldn't stop himself from falling further under her spell with each passing day. Chapter 3. The office had emptied hours ago. Even the cleaning staff had completed their rounds and departed, leaving only the low hum of the HVAC system and the soft blue glow of James's computer screen to fill the silence. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and he was still fixing the presentation that Victoria had so thoroughly eviscerated during the creative team's meeting that afternoon. "This is uninspired," she had announced barely 3 slides in, her voice carrying that particular tone of boredom that made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. "It's like you've never even met our clients." Poor Marcus had tried to explain the reasoning behind the concept, but Victoria had simply held up one perfectly manicured hand. "If you have to explain it, it's already failed. Start over." Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and walked out, pausing only to say, "James, fix this disaster by tomorrow morning." And so here he was, reconstructing an entire campaign presentation that the creative team had taken weeks to develop. He loosened his tie and rubbed his eyes, wondering for the thousandth time why he continued to subject himself to this particular form of professional torture. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Still alive over there?" James typed back, "Barely. How many bottles of wine have you gone through since the meeting?" The reply came quickly, "On my second. Seriously, though, don't stay up all night for her. It's not worth it." But James knew he would anyway. He always did. He was deep in the process of reworking the 5th slide when the security door beeped. He froze, listening to the sharp, distinctive click of heels against marble. Only one person wore those particular shoes in this office. The sound grew louder, and then Victoria appeared in the doorway. She'd changed clothes since the afternoon, now wearing a sleek black dress that James recognized as her dinner with important people outfit. Her makeup was still flawless, though her lipstick had been refreshed to a deeper shade of red. "You're still here?" she said, sounding genuinely surprised. James gestured at his computer. "The presentation isn't going to fix itself." Victoria placed her designer handbag on the edge of his desk and peered at his screen. She smelled of her signature perfume mixed with something else, expensive wine and the faintest trace of cigar smoke. James guessed she'd been dining with one of the older board members who still indulged in that particular vice. "The Henderson dinner went well, I take it?" he asked, trying not to notice how the light from his monitor highlighted the elegant line of her neck. Victoria was focused on his screen. "Oh yes, we closed the deal." She said it casually, as if acquiring a $7 million client was an everyday occurrence. "The font is wrong on this slide." I bit back a sigh. "It's the same font you approved this morning." "For the financial presentation, yes. This is creative. It needs to have more personality." She leaned closer, her shoulder nearly touching mine. "Use Avenir for the headlines." Avenir, right. James made the change, hyper-aware of her proximity. "Much better," she murmured, then straightened and walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. Her reflection was clearly visible against the dark glass, and she took a moment to adjust her hair, tilting her head slightly to examine her profile. James saved his work and asked, "Did you forget something? It's not like you to return to the office after a dinner meeting." Victoria turned, the city lights now backlighting her silhouette. "The dinner ended earlier than expected. Henderson's wife called, some family emergency." She walked back toward his desk, trailing her fingers along the surface. Did you think I'd forgotten?" James kept his expression neutral, refusing to read anything into her statement. "You're nothing if not predictable, James." She perched on the edge of his desk, crossing her legs at the ankle. Her shoes caught the light, the red soles gleaming.
I'm just doing my job. Is that all it is? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that James had no intention of addressing. He turned back to his computer, clicking through to the next slide. What would you prefer for the background color scheme? The blue from this morning or something warmer? Victoria allowed the change of subject, her expression suggesting she'd gotten exactly the reaction she had wanted. The blue is too corporate. Try a deep aubergine. James made the change, watching as Victoria leaned in again to view the results. She nodded, apparently satisfied, then surprised me by asking, "Have you eaten?" "What?" "Food, James. Have you consumed any since lunch?" I tried to remember. I had a protein bar around 4. Victoria rolled her eyes. That's not food. She retrieved her phone from her bag and tapped at the screen. I'm ordering from that Thai place you like, the one with the ridiculous name. Thai something, James supplied, momentarily thrown by this unexpected consideration. That's it. She finished placing the order, then set her phone down. 20 minutes. In the meantime, fix the header on slide 7. The kerning is atrocious. And just like that, they were back to work. Victoria pulled up a chair beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her arm near his, and began critiquing each element of the presentation with clinical precision. Unlike her usual dismissive feedback, however, her suggestions were actually constructive. "This image isn't working," she'd say, and then explain exactly why, offering alternatives that James had to admit were better than the originals. By the time the food arrived, delivered by a bewildered security guard who clearly hadn't expected to find the CEO and her assistant working past 10 at night, they had completely restructured the presentation. Victoria unpacked the food containers on the small conference table in the corner of the office, gesturing for James to join her. "Bring your laptop. We'll eat while we finish the last few slides." James complied, bringing over his computer and settling into a chair opposite her. Victoria opened containers, the scent of lemongrass and ginger filling the air. "Did you order enough for an army?" James asked, surveying the spread. "I wasn't sure what you'd want, and I was hungry." She handed him a pair of chopsticks. "The pad thai is yours. I remember you ordering it at that lunch with the Peterson account." The fact that she had noticed, let alone remembered, such a trivial detail caught James off guard. "Thank you," he said, accepting the container she pushed toward him. Victoria arranged her food precisely in front of her, then dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin before taking a single bite. Even eating takeout after hours, she maintained an air of polished perfection. "The presentation is much improved," she said after a few moments of silence. "The creative team should thank you." "They should thank you," I corrected. "Most of the changes were your ideas." Victoria waved her chopsticks dismissively. "I simply pointed out the obvious flaws. You're the one making it work." She took a sip of water. "That's your particular talent, isn't it? Making things work despite the inherent flaws." Is that a compliment or an insult? A ghost of a smile played at her lips. "Can it be both?" I found myself smiling back despite myself. These moments were rare, when Victoria dropped her imperious facade just enough to reveal the actual human being beneath. It was these glimpses that kept me holding on, kept me believing there was more to her than the cold, demanding boss she presented to the world.
"Tell me about the Henderson dinner," he said, partly because he was genuinely interested, and partly because he wanted to extend this unusual moment of camaraderie. Victoria speared a piece of chicken with surprising precision. Harrison was his usual tedious self, all golf stories and thinly veiled comments about my impressive rise in a male-dominated industry. She rolled her eyes, as if I haven't heard that exact line from every man over 50 in this business. "How did you respond?" I smiled, thanked him for his insight, and then systematically dismantled his proposed contract terms until he agreed to a 30% better deal than we'd initially discussed. Her expression was coolly satisfied, like a cat that had successfully cornered its prey.
He never saw it coming. "Impressive," James said sincerely. Victoria looked pleased by the compliment, though she tried to hide it. "Well, that's why they pay me the obscene salary." She set down her chopsticks and stretched slightly, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Now, back to the presentation. Show me what you've done with the final slides." They returned to work, the strange intimacy of sharing a late meal fading back into their usual professional dynamic. By 11:30, the presentation was complete, and far better than what the creative team had originally produced. "Send it to my phone," Victoria instructed, gathering her things. "I'll review it again before the morning meeting." "You realize this makes you responsible if they hate it," James pointed out. Victoria arched an eyebrow. "They won't hate it, it's excellent. And if they do, I'll make it very clear that their original concept was even worse." She slipped her phone into her bag. "Besides, no one questions my decisions. It's one of the perks of being me." The casual arrogance should have annoyed him, but there was something almost endearing about her absolute confidence. Or maybe he was just too tired to maintain his usual defenses against her peculiar charm. "Do you need me to call you a car?" he asked, shutting down his computer. Victoria checked her reflection in the dark window one last time, adjusting a strand of hair with practiced precision. "Already done. It should still be awaiting my return downstairs now." She hesitated, then added, "You should go home too, James. It's late." "I will. Just need to send a few emails first." She studied him for a moment, as if trying to solve a particularly complex equation. "You work too hard. I learned from the best." Victoria smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face and made James's heart do that irritating little slip it always did when she looked at him like that. "Good night, James." "Good night, Miss Sharp." She wrinkled her nose slightly. "After hours, when it's just us, you could call me Victoria, you know." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, the sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor gradually fading until the office was silent once more. James sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. These were the moments that confused him most, when Victoria showed glimpses of humanity, of warmth even, when she seemed to see him as something more than just an efficient assistant to be commanded and occasionally berated. He gathered the remnants of their impromptu dinner, tossing containers into the recycling bin. As he did, he noticed Victoria had left a small item on the conference table, her lip balm, the expensive French brand she applied religiously throughout the day. James picked it up, turning the small gold tube over in his palm. He could return it to her tomorrow, of course, but knowing Victoria's obsessive attention to her appearance, she might want it tonight. Before he could overthink it, he texted her, "You left your lip balm on the conference table. Do you need me to bring it down?" Her response came almost immediately, "If you wouldn't mind. Car's still here." 5 minutes later, James stepped out of the building's main entrance into the cool night air. Victoria's town car idled at the curb, its sleek black exterior gleaming under the streetlights. The driver opened the back door as James approached. Victoria sat in the shadows of the backseat, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her phone screen. She looked up as James extended his hand with the lip balm. "My savior," she said, accepting it with a small smile. "My lips would have been positively chapped by morning." "We can't have that. There'd be a company-wide crisis." Victoria laughed softly, the sound so unexpected and genuine that James found himself momentarily speechless. "Get in for a moment," she said, sliding over to make room. "I just received an email from Evans. He's proposing terms for the investment." James hesitated, then climbed into the back seat beside her. The car smelled of leather and Victoria's perfume, an intoxicating combination. She handed him her phone. "What do you think?" James read through the email, surprised that she was asking for his opinion on something this significant. "The terms are generous,
but that clause about board representation is problematic. My thoughts exactly. Victoria took the phone back, her fingers brushing against his. I'll counter tomorrow. Suggest a non-voting observer role instead. Good idea. They sat in silence for a moment, the intimacy of the car's interior making James acutely aware of how close they were sitting. Victoria seemed to feel it too, because she shifted slightly, creating a few more inches of space between them. "Thank you for bringing this down," she said, holding up the lip balm, "and for staying late to fix the presentation." She paused, then added, "I know I'm demanding." It was as close to an apology as Victoria Sharp ever came. "You expect excellence. There's nothing wrong with that." Victoria studied him in the dim light, her expression unreadable. Most people would have quit by now. Most people aren't up to the challenge. The corner of her mouth quirked upward. "And you are? I'm still here, aren't I?" For a moment, something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the strange, complex dynamic they shared. Then Victoria cleared her throat and glanced toward the front of the car. "You should go home and get some rest. Tomorrow will be another demanding day." James nodded and opened the door. "Good night, Victoria." The name felt strange on his lips, intimate in a way that their professional relationship wasn't supposed to be. Victoria seemed to notice it too, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she composed herself. "Good night, James." As the car pulled away from the curb, James watched its taillights disappear into the night traffic. He took a deep breath of the cool air, feeling the tension of the day finally begin to ebb away. It was these moments, rare glimpses of the real Victoria beneath the polished exterior, that kept him coming back, that made him endure the impossible standards and cutting remarks. Those brief instances when she let her guard down just enough to reveal that she saw him, really saw him, not just as an assistant, but as a person worthy of her respect. And God help him, but those moments made all the rest worth it. As he turned to hail a cab, his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "The presentation really is excellent. You've outdone yourself." James smiled to himself as he climbed into the taxi. Tomorrow, Victoria would undoubtedly be back to her demanding, critical self. The warmth of tonight would be forgotten, replaced by her usual cold perfectionism. But for now, for this brief moment between days, he would allow himself to enjoy the simple pleasure of her approval.
Thanks for listening. To continue the story, tap the thumbnail on your screen. And if you're enjoying this romance, give it a like and subscribe to Kiss in Chapters audiobooks.